True Sound Studios is in your ears.
Okay, so this is a really quick video. So many people ask me how I have enough inputs and outputs to run a mixing console with an interface. So I don't necessarily use an interface, so it's not one unit that does everything. So an interface is analog to digital converters and then digital to analog converters, which is what both of these SSL alpha link units do. And then to clock it, to get it the best 48K, 96K digital signal that it can, that is used between the converters and the computer and any other digital gear, you use something called the digital clock. I particularly use the Apogee Big Ben, and essentially this through the word clock, or what's also known as like BNC. It's also used for video. But these BNC connections is what clocks both of the converters and then also clocks the card that's in the computer. So the Apogee Big Ben clocks both of the converters and the card for the computer. These both handle the analog to digital. So when anything runs through the analog console into here, it goes from analog to digital so that it can go to the computer so that you can edit it in your DAW. But when it's played back, it needs to leave the digital computer and then come back analog. So that's where it goes from digital to analog. And both of these units do both of those things, but this one particularly handles more of the inputs and this one more of the outputs. So, and then this signal is sent through something called a Madi cable. It's essentially a digital fiber optic cable. And this cable runs then to the computer. So in the PCI Express slot on my motherboard in my computer is an SSL MadiXtreme card, and that's what handles the converters. That's essentially how I get the signal from the converters to the computer and then vice versa from the computer back to the converters. So that's just a really quick breakdown of my digital system. Now, these units are not nearly as inexpensive as a interface that does all three things at once, but because it's all broken up, things just work better. And there's just so many things that this helps, not to mention the quality of the conversion is just really good. So each one of these units is about $1,500. The Apogee Big Ben I think is pretty close to $1,500 also, and then the card that goes in the computer is almost another $1,000. So obviously it is more expensive, but if you guys look at any of the converters that are out there, you're gonna pay pretty close to that price, if not more. So now I will just quickly show you guys the connections that are on between both of these units, and I'm actually just gonna pull them right out of here just to make it a little easier to see. Okay, so just once again real quick, this is the Apogee Big Ben on top, Apogee Big Ben, and this is the digital clock. And then both of these are the SSL alpha link converters. So this one handles more of the inputs. This is actually 16 inputs, 4 outputs. This one is slightly different. It's in reverse. This one actually has 16 outputs and only 4 inputs. So if we turn these both around then, so on the back of the Big Ben, so the digital clock, you have all of these are all outputs, okay? So these right here. So you can actually clock 6 different sources with these BNC, or what they also known as word clock connections. So, which is a video jack. It's a digital signal that is sent, let's say, from this one, and then you'd run a signal to the input here on the converter. And then you don't actually need to run an output to another. But you could do that, let's say, if your digital clock only had one output, which I don't really know in what situation that would work out in. But so anyways, that's how you clock. So you'd run one cable from here to there. This is that cable I was talking about. Okay. So you'd run, let's see, output number 1, plug that in there. And then you'd plug this one into here. And you do the exact same thing with a second cable into the second converter, because you want to clock both of them. So that one would go on output number 2. And then for the computer, because the computer still needs to get clocked, you'd use a third cable and then run that one, which is, in my case, is a longer cable, and that would go to the computer. So then we have clocked digitally 3 different sources from one digital clock. Now you can also clock it through optical, which is different than this optical. This is called Madi. And then you can do SPDIF, so the RCA digital connection. And it also has AES output, which is another digital connection. Anyways, this thing has a lot of different options on it. And then for the converters, now this would be the reason to have, you know, multiple units, and you can actually cascade or connect together for these units. And they also have units that are 24 inputs and 24 outputs in one unit. It is double the size, but this is actually only 20 ins and 20 outs. These are the inputs. Now these are called DB25 cables. So this is what it looks like. It looks like a big old printer port. And so at the one end you would plug in, let's say right here, this is analog inputs 1 through 8. This is analog inputs 9 through 16. And then this is analog outputs 1 to 4, because there's only 4 outputs on here, even though there's more connections. But you would plug this in. Okay, and then you could tighten them up. And at the other end, you have your option. You can actually have another one of these connectors at the end. In my case, I primarily run TRS jacks at the end of these cables. I have a few that have XLR, but pretty much they're all TRS, at least in my studio. But like I said, you can get them other ways. And then this I would plug into the mixing console, and this is how I'm sending signal. In this case, I have 6 different DB25 to TRS 1/4 inch cables that run and handle all of the inputs just for these 2. And then, so after all this gets clocked and we send the signal in and out, now it needs to get to the DAW, and that's where we use this Madi cable. So this is a much thicker cable, and you can see the connections are bigger. And this is the cascading part. So you'd run the input to here, the output then goes to the input of the second unit, and then this is your output. So this is actually the final input, and this is the final output. And then these USB connections are not to hook up to your computer. This is actually just to update the firmware on both of these converters. I'd show you the MadiXtreme card that's in the computer, but obviously it's in the computer and I'm not taking that out. So just once again, you can buy up to 4 of these units and cascade them all together. And in the computer, it shows up as all separate inputs and all separate outputs. Depending on your DAW, some are pre-labeled, some aren't, but it's really kind of easy to figure out what goes where. And yeah, that's how I can run 40 inputs and 40 outputs off of multiple SSL alpha link converters. So thank you for watching this video. If you guys enjoyed this video, click that like button and consider subscribing for more content. So not only do I make YouTube videos, but I also produce tracks and I can mix and master your music. So once again, thank you for watching this video. I'm Weezna, and True Sound Studios is in your ears.